Hey everybody, this is Lisa Gilliam, Lisa 1SingingLady Gilliam here with your LLG Random But Real Wednesday Word on Word Wednesday. I apologize for the delay. We had some technical difficulties, so I had to move from my computer to my tablet. So I hope that you all be able to hear us and understand this conversation. I last week, let's just start it off with the poem. Last week I actually sang the song, and this time everything I'm gonna try to do the poem so that you're able to hear uh, what I'm doing. Hopefully, I have some background noise too, so hopefully that doesn't bother you all as well. This poem is called "No More Thoughts of Suicide," and like I said, I sang last week a little bit part of it, but I'm just going to start it off with that. Since I often thought of suicide as a way to end the pain, I often thought of suicide to stop all of the rain. I often thought of suicide, but then I became wise. I was born for a purpose, yet had not recognized. Life was full of promise, and I just had to see. Suicide was not the answer. No, not for you and not for me. God made me to worship Him and to be a beacon of light. I had to wait patiently, remain strong, and fight the good fight. So I will live each day to its fullest in order to succeed because I know life is not promised no matter what I need. I have to change my mind and my heart, and my thoughts need to be focused on Christ because I have a purpose. I have to keep that in mind. I want to hear my Savior say, Lisa, you have made me proud. You can enter in the gates of heaven because you are saved. No more thoughts of suicide. And then it's the song part until my destiny is fulfilled. And only God can say, I will continue to live in truth until my dying day. Christ is the only answer. He's the only way to prevent suicide from occurring and stop the sorrow of the present day. No More Thoughts of Suicide. That's on my first CD, Past the Present. You can get that here actually on YouTube or Pandora or Tidal or Amazon Music, wherever music is sold. So, what do you think about the lyrics of those words, Janae? And then I'll introduce you. We're doing stuff a little different this time.
Okay. Well, I think one of the things that I thought was interesting that it highlighted is um, the idea that we think that sometimes committing suicide is going to end all of the pain that comes along with whatever we're experiencing. Um, I had a good friend of mine that um, we were talking about this a few months ago, and one of the things that came up is the idea that if we decide to end our lives, um, it almost kind of transfers the pain. We may or may not, like, we can't necessarily say what state we're going to be in to be able to, like, whether it ends everything or all those other things. But if we have family, if we have children, if we have loved ones, there are people that are going to feel the impact, and it almost multiplies the pain that we were experiencing several
Mhm.
times over for every person that is impacted by not just losing us, but the fact that they feel like, could I have done anything? How dare they leave? All of those feelings of hurt and confusion that can come up for those that care about us, that either didn't know what was happening or wish they could have been more involved or more helpful. So I think it's a misnomer that it ends pain. I think in a lot of ways it, very quantifiable ways multiplies it. So maybe
Understandable.
it's so maybe it's so it makes it interesting to be able to look at what does it look like to maybe navigate through pain differently, change our relationship with how we navigate through it, rather than thinking that that is as concrete of an answer as it can romanticize us to say that it is.
Okay. So you all have heard from today's guest, Janai Marshall. I met Janae, I don't even know how long ago it was. We actually met at Psalm 117 Coffeehouse. My friend
Hmm.
Carlana Acker was the owner of that. She isn't in the area now, but shout out to Carlana. And then maybe, I don't know if it was a few weeks or a month later, we ran into each other at my church at the time and became her church, Cornerstone Peaceful Bible Baptist Church. And so we just kind of connected. I think like all of the younger people that I meet, they become like little sisters to me. And so she is super talented, graphic artist, writer, vocalist. We sang in the choir together for a brief moment in time while I
Hmm.
was there. And also became a therapist. She currently is a therapist, intake therapist at a psychiatric hospital. And so I was scrolling through Instagram one day and I saw her sharing her story about COVID. And I know that she has mental health background. And so today we're actually going to be talking to you about COVID and mental health. I am able to see the stream. Doing things on the tablet is a little bit differently. I'm going to see if I can actually pull up the stream on the computer so at least I can respond to your questions. Um, and so I'll be asking questions as people write them on YouTube. They're only able to do that right now on YouTube. If you all are following on any of social media, then just know that we can't see that right now. We'll have to respond to that later. But for now, if you want to actually have immediate answers or responses to your answers or questions, then please visit my YouTube page, which is youtube.com/1SingingLady, and that's spelled out ONESINGINGLADY. And then I'll be able to ask those questions to Janai, or if you have any for myself. And so we are going to get started. So Janai, what was it about just your experience that you were willing to actually share with people?
As far as when I got COVID or related to being a therapist, like which part of it?
Let's start with anything. Like most people don't. Well, my experience has been that a lot of people don't want to share what they've gone through just in life. They rather just kind of keep it to themselves, either because of shame or because it was their experience. And so I know one of the things that we talked about. Um, these Wednesday posts are always random but real. I may post them in advance, but I don't ever put a lot of thought around what it is that we're going to talk about because I want to have real candid conversations. And so it still was something that was made you say, okay, you know what, I'm willing to talk about my story. So what is it?
Sure. So like you mentioned before, I work at a local psychiatric hospital in Northern Virginia, and um, one of the things that I remember being the first thing that stuck out to me when the whole pandemic hit was the fact that when they were talking about people being able to work from home, I knew immediately that that wasn't going to be the case for me. Like the fact that all of us are considered essential employees, and this idea of being able to be safe at home was not going to be an option for me. And that was really anxiety inducing for me because as much as I wanted to be able to be there for um, our patients and the fact that we work with a really vulnerable community that was going to get even more large with more and more people feeling anxious and more having their depression exacerbated by not knowing what was going to happen next with the pandemic. It made us feel anxious too because it almost felt like we couldn't protect ourselves the way that other people were being given the opportunity to be able to be kept safe. So I remember one of the first things I did was try my best to fight to build up my immune system because I felt like that was the only thing that I could do to be able to feel protected besides, you know, the PPE and all those things. Like I was wearing those like really ugly K95 dust masks in the airport before everybody else was doing it. So people were looking at me crazy in the airport. I didn't care, no problem. So I just felt like I was grasping for whatever I could since there was so little that we knew about it to be able to try to stay safe. Um, so when I started building my immune system up, it wasn't because I didn't think that I was hoping that I wouldn't get it. It's more like I kind of know it's inevitable at this point if I'm going to still have to interact with people in public like this. It was more of a
Mhm.
matter of when I get it, is my immune system going to be able to be strong enough to be able to recover well, or maybe even minimize what the impact of it's going to be, rather than it being the worst of what we're hearing in the media that some people are experiencing. So I spent like 3 months making sure I could, doing all the elderberry, all the black seed oil, um, all of the things, all the antiviral supplements that I could to be able to keep my respiratory system clear and strong and make sure that I wouldn't have any issues. So um, when I ended up well, the way I think of that it happened, I think I had contact with a patient. There was a really psychotic patient at my hospital that came as a walk-in, kept pulling his mask down because he didn't know any better, was coughing right in my face. We really can't confirm that that's where I got it because nobody really knows where they're getting it because it's airborne. So I can't really blame it
Right.
on that. That's where I presume it may have been. All I know is I got sick pretty immediately. Like within that 24 hours, I had 103-degree fever the very next day.
Wow.
Um, so I was out for the count. It took me down pretty quickly, and I think that's pretty par for the course for what it's been for a lot of people. That even if they may be a asymptomatic carrier, once they get symptoms, it comes on really quick onset. Um, so yeah, I had 103-degree fever. Honestly, my worst symptom um, at first was this headache that I felt like was gonna split my head open. Like it was the first time that I felt like that I was worried, am I gonna die? Because it was almost like if somebody were having like an aneurysm, like you feel like something is wrong inside of me right
Mhm.
now. That was the thing that I felt like was the most alarming. There were other things that were scarier, like losing my sense of smell and my sense of taste and all of those type of things because I live alone. So if there were a gas leak or something that normally I'd be able to pick up on to alert myself to danger, I wouldn't be able to pick up on it because I couldn't smell anything. So there were all these different fears around safety and my normal ability to be able to navigate as a woman who lives alone now that I'm divorced. Um, that COVID, I think, presented some fears that I wasn't really expecting. One of my girlfriends lives in New York. My friend Lauren Heatherly, one of my favorite people in the whole world. She caught it before I did. She was in New York, so she was right in the epicenter of everything. And she was one of the people that I called when I got sick. And the first thing that she told me to kind of prepare myself is that this is going to be more of a mental battle than it is a physical battle.
Mhm.
All of the things that the fears and emotional toll that come up more than anything else because there's so much in the media that's been fear mongering us to because media sells and wants to be able to focus on the worst of the worst of things. And not that there's not plenty that's been terrible to be able to hear about the death toll and how this is ravaging people's bodies. But if that's all the media is focusing on, and we're all sitting at home and not being able to socialize and all very anxious because there's very little information that was going around that time so that we could
Mhm.
understand what was happening. All we were doing was consuming all of this information around COVID, trying to figure out, what to do, what are the numbers, how do I protect myself, can bleach kill it, all that type of stuff. So
Right.
I think consuming that regularly was bringing up a lot of anxiety um, and bringing up some safety concerns that normally I probably wouldn't have been thinking about. Um, so what made this an interesting experience for me, because I could talk about symptoms, but those are things that I think are common for a lot of people. 2 days into me being sick, there was a leak inside of my wall, inside of my condo, that was flooding another unit.
Mhm.
Um, and the property management basically told me that I needed to be able to evacuate my unit and find a place to stay for an indefinite amount of time so that they could fix this emergency leak, not knowing that, I had a presumed case of COVID. Now I had just gone that same day. I was already planning to go get a COVID test. This is my second day of being sick. I was just too weak and too much in pain the first day to go, or else I would have gone immediately. But I was almost falling over trying to go to the bathroom, much less trying to figure out how to go get a COVID test. So,
Right.
um, so in the middle of all of that, trying to find a place to get a rapid test so that I can figure out when I can go back to work, what to tell my job, all of those type of things. I have to find a place to live, and who's going to take somebody in that
That's
thinks they have
right.
access to causes. I can't go with my parents. My dad's immunocompromised. I can't live with my sisters. Everybody wants to be safe too. So, um, fortunately, um, it was gracious enough to be able to have one of my friends that he had gotten COVID right close to the beginning of the pandemic. So, um, his aunt just happened to have an apartment that she only lived in a few months out of the year, and she gave permission for
Mhm.
me to be able to stay in there. He wasn't afraid to be around me, so that because he had already gotten it. Was helping me with my dog. That's another thing. Where was I going to take? I couldn't even walk my dog because I was so weak. But fortunately, I had a safe place to go. That was just a few minutes
That's
from
a
my house
blessing.
to be able to stay. And I had to live there for almost 4 or 5 weeks while I was
Wow.
out sick. So, um, but the fact that I had this place to be for, to be safe and, um, and that they were working with me, that I didn't have to, pay this exorbitant amount. Like, it was major. Like, that's not something every step of this made me think about, for somebody that's not in as privileged of a situation that I'm in, with friendship connections, if they're in a place that they don't have any family nearby, if they didn't have the financial means to be able to figure this out, if, people that are having to be able to work service jobs, just like other essential workers that don't have like pandemic pay like a hospital would for a couple of weeks, like how many people's families and livelihoods are being ravaged by them having to figure out not just being sick, but navigating other people's fears and ignorances around this illness. So,
Can I just
um,
say, one of the things that Ashley Burton, who was on last week, she talked about community. We were just talking about mental health basically in general, and both of us are mental health advocates. And I mentioned how, although Chadwick Boseman did not die, it had nothing to do with mental health related, but you could clearly tell that his community was strong because no one knew that he was suffering from cancer for 4 years. And I was
mhm,
like, I want friends like that. I can't say that I have that type of community. And
mhm,
so that is a blessing to know that you had people there to support you through this process. You know, I don't even know who I would call. And I live with an elderly relative, and so
mhm,
they're my parents are dead, my grandparents are dead, and then of course I wouldn't want to compromise them either. So I don't
right.
have any other resource. My brother has a family with children, so um, that would be, that's a lot to juggle. And I praise God. The scripture that came to mind is, order your steps in the word. Like he orders the footsteps of a righteous man are ordered by the Lord. And so it sounds like yours were
Mhm,
definitely ordered, even though, you had so many different balls to juggle, so to speak,
yeah.
in the air. So I'm glad to hear that. But that is a lot. And that's something I can't even say that I've thought about, through that whole
Mhm,
process. That's a lot to have to think
mhm.
about.
And even to that point, like, you know, for somebody that was in a position where they didn't have any family, didn't have any friends that felt like they could safely be emotionally safe to talk about what's happening, or to be able to be physically safe around, to be able to make space for them to live. Like,
Mm.
even if at that time hotels were allowing people to buy hotel rooms, who has the money for an indefinite amount of time to be able to stay in a hotel room? You know what I mean?
Right.
Much less on top of that, which was the second issue that I didn't anticipate was going to be a problem, figuring out groceries. While everybody was trying to figure out how to be able to get access to grocery stores, things um, selling out quickly in every store. All of the grocery delivery services, you couldn't get delivery for them. People were trying to figure out how to be able to do Uber Eats at the time, like, because all of that was so new that nobody really knew how to navigate it all at the time. People were afraid to be able to do Uber Eats. I can't afford to eat Uber Eats all the time. Those delivery services, it's just
Right.
not. It's not affordable. It's not sustainable. You know, it made me very food insecure very quickly in a way that I had not been before. And I
Mhm.
was a person that had some degree of privilege and means to even have access to that, much less be in a neighborhood where I could even have access to be able to have food delivery. Because you have to be in proximity. You can't be in a food desert and expect to get grocery delivery. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm
So
still
I
trying
used to
to
work.
get certain
Hmm.
things. So
Hmm.
I get it.
Yeah, I used to work in Lincoln Heights, public housing community in DC. I was one of the case managers over there, and it wasn't a food desert at first, and then the only grocery store, um, there was a guy that was a disgruntled fired employee that came back and blew the whistle because
Wow.
he told that the employees had been injecting expired meat with red food dye to make it look like it was fresh and reselling it and repackaging it with new labels. So it was good that that was being exposed, but as a result, the whole place got shut down and now it's been a food desert for, I guess, now at least a decade now. That was quite some
Wow.
time ago. It was maybe like, yeah, it was maybe 5 years ago at the time, but it's been a long time. So, yeah. Um, I mean, I at least was in a position where even with some help, if I needed to get food delivery, I could. And I needed a great deal of help at the time because I didn't have any income at the time. Even though our hospital network had promised some degree of pandemic pay, I had to be able to have a
Mhm.
positive COVID test in order to even qualify for that. Um, and while I was sick, um, like the first COVID test they lost. So one of the things I don't know if you saw in the news reports is that there were a couple of different lab processing companies that were sharing that because of their being overflow with so many COVID tests, they were losing a lot of the samples or
Mm.
mixing up some of the samples. So I don't know if they lost
Wow.
mine or they mixed them up or whatever, but whatever mine the case, my results got lost. So and I didn't find out until 2 weeks into being ill because they just kept telling me it was pending, it was pending, it was pending. And it was like, oh yeah, we kind of lost the results. Can you come take another test? By that time, it'd been 2 weeks. I was like, I may come back negative at this point, um, which means I wouldn't be able to get my pay for this past paycheck.
Mm.
So at this point, it's affecting my livelihood. Like, it was a lot
Right.
to have to figure out how to navigate. And all I could think about was, this is me having family, having gainful employment, being in an area that I have access to these different things, even though my access has been limited right now. How much more so for somebody that had less access to these things than me are black people disproportionately being, decimated financially, and physically with their health because of how this is compromising their ability to be able to thrive and provide for their families. And that's only if they're be able to stay gainful employed. How many people have lost their jobs or their industries completely gone away because of COVID? So
Very.
um, I couldn't I couldn't go through all of that without thinking about friends that this was dealing with them and their families much differently than me. So and then on top of that, it being right in the middle of uprising. So
A
um,
lot. It was a lot. It was a lot happening at one time. So how do you, being in the mental health field, how did you juggle like really all of that? Like how did you process through all of that? And then after that, how long was it before you returned back to work?
So I was out of work for a total of 5 weeks. Um, yeah, 5 weeks. I'm still
So
in
you
the
were
hole.
when were you feeling better in that process though? So like were you feeling better at three,
Mm,
week 3, week 4?
I wasn't cleared by my doctor to go back until 5 weeks. I would
Okay.
say week 4 is when I started to feel like a human again.
Hmm.
Where I wasn't to the point that if it was a normal day, I would have thought about calling out of work. But apparently I was still showing signs of being contagious. So, um, with like virus still being in my system. So it wasn't until 5 weeks that honestly I even felt comfortable going back. Um, I will say though that because this was like the end of May, the beginning of June, that all of this happened for me. It was right when all of the George Floyd protests were happening. So I honestly was kind of grateful that I was out for that long, even though I still have 3 weeks of that I've never been able to get income for. So I'm still kind of rebounding from that.
Sorry.
I was Yeah, I mean, but honestly, I was grateful for the break. I don't know if I could have emotionally been able to handle being at work when the protests and the uprising started. So just to be able to have the space for my body to recover and for me to emotionally grapple with all that was happening and to process all of that grief and the trauma porn that everybody was posting because everybody was home and nobody had anything better to do than to just watch it over and over again. I can't even say nobody had better to do. It's almost like we couldn't escape it.
Right.
Is the
It
better
was
way
in
to
our
put it.
face. Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Right. So, and sometimes when we don't know what to do when we're hurting, we just kind of watch it over and over again and replay it over and over again and try to turn it around and understand it better and all that type of stuff and post about it and read about it and all that type of stuff. And as a result, it was just me and social media in an isolated place that wasn't my home. And I got a chance to turn off social media and just be isolated and just rest. So, how did I deal with it? In some ways, I kind of feel like I didn't. I just kind of let myself be. That made, and in some ways at the time, it didn't feel like I was doing anything, but honestly, it was letting myself not be overstimulated by it. And I had to turn off social media for long stretches of time, which I was, sick enough that I didn't always want to be on social media all the time anyway. But I remember one day I was just so overwhelmed by like with grief over everything because it was back to back, like Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, like it all happened on the same period of time. The Ahmaud Arbery one really bothered me, you know. Um, and then for that to be compounded, I remember just like one day it was like it was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I just wasn't able to sleep, and um, I started listening to this song that I ended up kind of just having to play over and over and over again. That is a song by a girl named Natalie Lauren. She's a really beautiful artist. You look her up if you guys are familiar with her. But she has this song called "Just Breathe" that she had just come out with during the time. Um, and I talked about this in my last live, but when I was talking about my experience with COVID, but it was basically reminding me like it's okay to not be okay. You know, you can just be here in this moment, go ahead and fall apart, and just let yourself breathe. And
Mhm.
it normalized that moment for me because I felt like I was losing it, and I felt like there's no way, there's nowhere in the world that I would, with my black woman self on the planet, would be able to escape this. And I was just overwhelmed by it in that moment. And fortunately, because of a lot, you know, that song being accessible to interrupt me, um, it had me start making playlists. So that ended up being a big thing for me, like being able to curate these playlists that I know would interrupt where my mind was at, and to be able to kind of meditate on that instead. And they weren't all like Jesus will work it out, those type of songs. I didn't grow up in traditional church, so it wasn't like that. That's not my, it's not my jam
I get
personally. I don't really
it.
resonate with that sound really that people will go to for like gospel type of stuff. It's just never been me. So most of it isn't necessarily that genre, but they gave vocabulary to how I was feeling and gave me a chance to be able to focus on something higher and better and greater and more true than how I was feeling. And given that space to be able to kind of immerse myself in that rather than just get lost in my feelings was a big thing that helped me to work through that. And I had the time. Clearly, all I was doing was laying up sick with fever
Right.
with a dog who don't speak English and got no job. So making
I
playlists was
think
a big thing for me.
Well, I think definitely, we share the love of music and music is healing. Like I don't care what anybody says. And it's funny how in my time as I'm healing, um, I don't sing as much or listen to music as much. And, you know, I think that part of that is because Satan's job is to still kill and destroy, and I believe he's trying to steal that aspect of things, from me. But I'm smart enough to know that when it boils down to it, I'll always, go back to music. You're welcome. Robert said, thanks for having this discussion, Robert Hazard. I always go back to that. But one of the things that you said kind of resonated with me. I think there's a difference between just being and escaping. I don't think you
Yeah.
were escaping. I think that when it comes to mental health, we don't know, meaning like collectively, the world, the majority of us are not taught on how to be. Just
Hmm.
just be present. Mindfulness is really huge now. The word mindfulness, but if you think about it, like I posted a few weeks ago, how adult coloring is so like it's such a pleasant way to be mindful and in the present. But I can color outside the lines if I want to. I color inside the lines. You can't judge me on how I color. It doesn't matter. It's my decision on how and what colors I choose is one of the best mindfulness activities that I think exists. And another one is when you're watching TV. I was sharing with a friend. She will not look at one commercial, not at all. She will skip through that thing. And how many people of us do that in the process of just trying to hurry up and get to the essence of the show that we're watching? But sometimes we miss all the extras when we don't take the time to just be present and just let it play like we
Hmm.
had to in the old days when we didn't have DVR and we didn't have all of these, ways to record and I remember when we didn't have VCR. So I guess I'm kind of telling my age. I don't think I look 47, but I remember when it wasn't a VCR. And so,
Hmm.
I think that being present actually requires us to be present. And
Yeah.
regardless of what we're facing, whether it's illness, whether it's, sickness, divorce, which we're going to transition to, I think that we have to learn to be present with our feelings and not afraid of being present, with
Hmm.
regards to whatever is kind of happening. I
Yeah,
see that I pause. So if I'm pausing, I'm hoping you all can hear me. Hopefully we've had some Wi-Fi issues, but hopefully it'll come back. Um,
I can hear you.
but okay. So sorry about the pause, you all, but hopefully it will not cut us out completely.
Yeah.
Um, but
So far, we've been
how
pretty good.
what do you think about, just that process of going through any type of major life situation and
Hmm.
still handling, mental health? Because this is the thing, all of us have some type of, um, issue, concern. It just might not be diagnosed.
Hmm.
It just might not be diagnosed. So what do you think, it could be happening, or kind of should be happening, when it comes to, mental health and, just life situations? So COVID was
Yeah.
definitely one, but before COVID, you shared with me, about the divorce and that you were willing to share about that. So.
Mhm. Sure. So this is where I feel like the intersection of blackness comes in because, and it kind of speaks to the point that you had where it's like, we don't really know how to sit with ourselves or to take care of ourselves. I am a firm believer that the reason that black people seldom know how to care for ourselves is because
Mhm.
we were um, we were conditioned not to. Like we were specifically brought here to this country, show like on the basis of our labor being the only thing that made us valuable.
Mhm.
So as a result, it can be hard to sit and not feel like we're being idle or like we're not doing something of value if we're just sitting and resting. And
Got
that's
it.
something that it may not always be attributed to that, but ultimately that's a part of conditioning. Um, so in some way or another, there's that conditioning is behind that. Where in a similar type of way that I think Americans are, conditioned to be consumers. Um, I think Black people were because we were conditioned to be considered chattel in America and to be specifically here for our labor that we provide. It's hard for us to be able to treat ourselves as though we know how to operate, as not just providing our labor being the only thing that makes us valuable. And how we're
Mhm.
spending our time and how we're showing up in different spaces in our workplaces, at home with our families. I should be doing something right now. I can't just put my feet up, you know what I mean? Like, let me go clean something. Like, sure, that means we're able to get some productive things done, but at the core of it, I think it speaks to how we've never really learned how to care for ourselves well, or the value of it. So one of the things that's been coming up for me is that like just as much as I care about, you know, Black lives not being murdered by police, I care about Black lives mattering enough to care for them, for ourselves, and to heal internally. Like I feel like I don't want us to die from stress any sooner than I want us to die from police brutality. So,
Absolutely.
and one of my favorite groups to be able to follow on social media is this group called Nat Ministry, and
Mhm.
the idea behind their platform is the fact that taking rest is to some degree a revolutionary act for Black people. Because if you've been operating as though your work, your labor, the things that you do are the only thing that speaks to your worth and your value, not just in to yourself, but in your relationships and to your workplace, especially in the workplace, then you're not going to understand how being able to take that vacation and to put in that PTO and to be able to take that nap when your body is tired is in direct defiance to the lie that your body is only of worth because of your labor. It
Mm.
basically says that is not true, and I am valuable enough to be able to have my worth be preserved and to be affirmed and being able to rest and be restored and to be able to have the things that I need so I'm not pouring from an empty cup. It's literally a revolutionary act to allow our bodies and our minds and our souls to be restored and to reclaim some degree of agency over it, to say that I have control over what happens with my time and my body and my mind and my heart and my spirit right now. And those external things that have those demands on me and that scream at me from different phases of society, what my worth and my value is supposed to be and how I show up and the things that I do, they will not dictate what my life will be. I'll be the one that decides. And I'm able to reclaim some degree of ownership over that in the way I take my rest and allow myself to take pleasure in my time with my family, in my sleep, in my ability to be able to eat food that I enjoy and to take that vacation with my loved ones and to be able to make memories as though only other people are worthy of doing that.
Hmm.
Why am
Right.
I, you know what I mean? So
Hmm.
that being said, I feel like that idea has been kind of central to how I've been having to deal with not just everything with the pandemic, but even when I was going through my divorce, because that was only a couple of years ago, you know, relatively recent. And it's informed how I've tried to figure out how to show up as a single woman in this space. Um, you know, it's made me have to decide like what kind of things actually make me happy when I'm having a hard time navigating this pandemic or whatever. How can I lean into those things, you know, in order to be able to um, not allow myself to be overwhelmed by the other stuff? Um, and how can I practice treating myself kindly? Like, I think we're like I haven't I've been having to practice really being um I don't know, that takes practice. Like I feel like we're really hard on ourselves sometimes, especially when we go through stuff that none of us have ever gone through before, like all these really big transitions. I think we expect ourselves to handle them better than we are. You know, like I'm a whole adult. I should be dealing with this whole lot better. You've also never been through this before. Like you've
Right.
never
Right.
experienced this before. We've never had, you know, in your lifetime, we've never experienced a pandemic like this. We've never had this degree of our causes on the global stage or our black murders being on television for us to have to consume on a regular basis or being reposted with ease on social media. You know, all of that is unprecedented to this degree. So I think the expectation for us to deal with that stuff better, um, if we find ourselves having a hard time with it, like it gives us the opportunity to practice being kinder to ourselves and patient for ourselves for dealing with something that's new. So, and I think we are much quicker to do that with people that we don't know. Um, where we can give them compassion to be able to respond to something in a way like, you know, they're just learning this job, you know, give them a little bit of time, or they just had a bad day, you know, this isn't how they normally are, you know, or even somebody that we really care about or that we love, like we'll give them the benefit of the doubt if they act out of character or if they're having a hard time with something. And we'll be kind to them if they start falling for the scene to be able to affirm them that everything's going to be okay. And how often do we talk to ourselves like somebody that we love?
Right. We take advantage or maybe take it's a disadvantage in the sense of those people that are closest
Hmm.
to us. Often those are the
Yeah.
ones that get the brunt of everything.
Mhm.
And you're so
Right.
right. Lorna mentioned she earlier, she said that was a powerful point. Janae, you're so right about that conditioning. And then Robert had to say, yes, you matter. So it's important to take back power, self-care.
Yeah.
Amen to that. So that definitely is true.
Mhm.
I
Yep.
often speak about it's interesting how we go through different things in our life and how that ends up fueling everything else. So I speak about suicide prevention because at one point I wanted to commit suicide and I was depressed. I had PTSD prior to my mom dying, but the manner in which she died, which I'm really now starting to tell more people. I never thought that leaving for work one day saying, bye, mom, have a great day, I love you, would be the last time I would ever hear her voice. And so I don't share that with a lot of, I didn't hear her voice for 2 weeks. And so today is actually would have been my dad's birthday. And so it's
Mhm.
weird. Last year and this year, I had a breakdown about my mom on my dad's birthday.
Mhm.
So I know that my life now and the things I've gone through are also to help other people who grieved. Um, because unless you lost certain people, like it's different if you're close with your parent. And when I say I can't even count on both hands, it's beyond 10 people that's parents have died since my mom has died. And even though I had lost my dad and my grandparents, and I found my grandmother dead at 95, and so this triggered that pain. But one of the things that I have not had in the last 3 years is sleep. Not because I didn't want it. I have the worst case of insomnia, and because of some health issues and having to take medications for them, I don't want to take melatonin. I don't want to take, but I've tried essential oils. I sell doTERRA, and so I've tried, vetiver and some different lavender, and sometimes they provide a release, but nothing has provided quote unquote a cure. And I believe that as I go through this process, I do get better, but something just as simple as sleep is so important, you know and so I think that yes, we do need to tell ourselves sometimes that it's okay to rest. Like, that's important, and even when I sleep, it's not REM sleep. I want to find my REM. I want it back, and I think
Mhm.
it's not until you lose something. So you were talking about how you lost, sense of taste, right? And just the different things that we go through in life. It's not until we lose it, or we don't have the ability to function on 100, percent, or maybe even 80%, that we're just like, but that's the thing about life. If we don't learn anything from our experiences, then what's the reason of, what I'm saying? Like, I don't think that we go through anything just for ourselves. And so what
Mhm.
do you think was the experience, or the lesson that you've learned, any other lesson that you learned through this process?
Um, Number one, that rest and sleep are two different things.
Mm,
Um, and I can give myself space to rest even if I can't sleep
mm,
as consistently as I want to. Um,
okay.
uh, Number two, that part of self care is taking care of my business and the things I don't want to do.
Mm, mhm,
Um, to make sure that because if I'm leaving bills unattended to and doing all that stuff that I have anxiety about, and or that I'm like there's this thing called the impossible task. When we get really depressed, like there's these really seemingly simple things that it can take me months, a year, 2 years to get to, just because it just feels so overwhelming to me because of my
mm,
depression or because of my anxiety. Even if it's just mailing something off that would take 5 minutes, it's now the impossible task, you know? So,
I-
and being able to allow help that I normally wouldn't allow in from other people or from other resources, and to deal with any shame around it in order for me
mm,
to be able to get what needs to be done. So one of the things that I did, I don't talk about this often, when I was going through my divorce, because I did get to the point where I was dealing with some suicidal thoughts. Um, I never attempted or anything during that time. I didn't get to that point where I was like in imminent danger or anything like that. But so for our audience, there's something called so one of the things that I do at the hospital is I do risk assessments um, um, for people that need to necessarily stay overnight in the hospital. So our patients are primarily dealing with feeling thoughts of harm to self, harm to others, excuse me, or they're having difficulty with gauging their sense of reality, where it's hard to keep themselves from harm's way because they're putting themselves in risky situations because of you know not being able to connect with reality or dissociating or whatever. So, but primarily it's suicidality. Um, and there's a spectrum of that experience, of that feeling. So it's not always that when somebody is dealing with suicidal thoughts, because this is one of the things I wanted to be able to kind of give some education on for our audience today. Um, just because suicidal thoughts are coming up does not necessarily mean that you need to stay overnight in a hospital at that time. You do not meet criteria for that. And there's plenty of help available before it gets to that point. There's levels and degrees of support before it gets to the point where you'd be in imminent danger of wanting to hurt yourself. So, and the words that we use in the hospitals is passive suicidal thoughts, and then there's active suicidal thoughts. So, passive suicidal thoughts are like, I don't want to hurt myself, but, you know, if I could fall asleep and not wake up, I wouldn't, you know, be upset about it. Or, if I could just disappear or be rescued by some external experience like a natural disaster or COVID, or if a bus happened to accidentally run me over, I wouldn't be upset about it. But I'm not necessarily putting myself in harm's way. You know what I mean? Where you're kind of okay if an external source were to rescue you, but you're not actively putting action or thinking about putting action towards harming yourself. You just don't want to
right.
be
I don't have a
here
plan.
to
Hmm.
experience this. Right. So, and may not even necessarily been thinking about concrete ways of how to die necessarily either, even
Mm-hmm.
if it's not a plan. So when it goes into active thoughts, it kind of teeters past that point where you may not necessarily be saying that you have a way you want to hurt yourself, but you're being more reckless and not as vigilant about keeping yourself from danger, speeding a little bit more, not paying as much attention when you're behind the wheel, like making riskier decisions sexually or with alcohol or drugs with the people you put yourself around, not being as vigilant about your surroundings, doing things that could put you in harm's way because you kind of don't care as much about the consequences of what could happen to you. Because that sense of being able to see that you're worth protecting yourself from danger is eroded because of how you've been feeling. And then it can go as far up to having, concrete ways of thinking about wanting to do harm, um, or giving things away that normally would be valuable to you, but you feel like you don't need them anymore. Um, because you're coming to terms with not being here anymore and starting to make preparations and preparatory acts towards, getting materials, researching ways to do. Or you're starting to prepare for or actually ready to take action towards doing something, even if you haven't thought about a concrete way to do it. The fact that you're there trying to formulate and think through how could this be something that's more feasible and you're not afraid and pushing the thought away, that's where it's more into the active stage where it's something you feel your heart like feel a way about but starting to embrace as a real reality, something that could actually happen. So I would say I was kind of, if this is on a scale of 1 to 10, where 0 is I'm having a hard time, but I don't necessarily want to die, 10 being don't leave me in a room by myself or I absolutely will do something to take my life, I probably at the worst got about a 7, 6 or 7 around that period. I've been a 10 before when I was younger, but that's I'd say was the worst that it was in the past couple of years with the whole divorce process. Um, so one thing that I did is I did something called a partial hospitalization program. I didn't have to go into the hospital. It's more than just going to therapy once a week, but it gives you a break from school. From work or school if you're a student. You go on FMLA for the amount of time that you're there, so your job is protected. There's degrees of treatment that are more than just going to get a therapist once a week or twice a week or however long you can afford it. So there's IOP where you can go to something maybe 3 days a week, do group therapy, maybe even have a psychiatrist. In this case, I did a higher level of care than that, which was day treatment. I was there like a work day, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. There's group therapy, there's a doctor that's there, and if I wanted to get any recommendations for medication, they were there to give it to me. At the time, I was very resistant to medication recommendations for a myriad of reasons, from church stuff to me being a mental health care professional myself and the stigma around that, and what does that say around me, and do I even need that? I should know how to handle this, all that type of stuff we just talked about before.
Right.
Um, and I needed that break and that additional support because I was not functioning well. If you get to, it's really for if you're not in danger of harming yourself imminently, but you know that you're not doing your day to day functioning sufficiently. You're calling out of work a lot, going to
Mm-hmm.
sleep all day long. Your appetite has been fluctuating. Um, Insomnia to the point where it's either a lot of sleep or not enough sleep. Your ADO, which is your hygiene routine, is going down. Where you just know you're just not a functioning adult right now. There's a level of treatment that was sufficient to be able to support that. We admit to people to our PHP program all the time, and it's really helpful. As long as you can allow yourself to have enough space to deal with the any sense of shame around needing that level of support could be super helpful so that you don't necessarily need it again. So I did that for a few weeks while I was going through that. Um, and if not, I know I would have stayed on the trajectory where I would have gone into really severely active suicidal thoughts if I hadn't allowed it to be interrupted by getting that support. The other thing I was going to say about medication, because I told you
Mm-hmm.
that there was the stigma around that. Um, and everybody is permitted to have their own ideas around that. Me, as a mental health professional working in a hospital where medication is a regular part of the treatment plan for all of our patients because it's a higher level of care for our hospital, and for somebody that had to grapple with that for myself, one of the things that I think has happened with being able to support the patients that we have that I think has changed my thoughts on that. And with what I was experiencing at the time and how severely impaired I was with my functioning with how the rest I was during that time, is that sometimes medication at its best, if you have a good doctor that listens and you know how to advocate for yourself and you find a good fit for a clinician that you're willing to work with, that you can see is, cares about something that's, finding a regimen that's going to work for you, because they are out there. We have amazing doctors at our hospital. Not everybody's just out there to throw meds at you. It's just not the case. Um, at best, medication, if you can find some that, if you can work through the process of working through side effects and all that, they can help lift the fog just enough for talk therapy to be helpful. So if you're stuck in the fog and the thick of the depression and the anxiety, and that's all you see, it can help lift that fog enough for community to be helpful, for talk therapy to be helpful and cut through, for all the other support that you feel like should be working but is not working, to be able to be helpful again, because you can at least see it and hear it and let it in through that. They can penetrate through the thickness again. So it lifts it enough for it to be helpful. So
And I'm
something to
definitely not
consider.
against that, against medication. I think that if it's necessary, then it's necessary. Just like if I have a headache and I need to take Tylenol because I have a headache, then I take it. If I can handle whatever the situation is so that I don't need to take it, then I won't. Um, because there is also the abuse of medication as well. But having worked with youth, I've been pretty much working with students since for the last 12 or so years. And that's one of the things that kind of comes up a lot with the students. Some of them, have diagnosis of ADHD or ODD and clearly know that they would function better in class with medication.
Hmm.
But some of them the parents will take them off midstream or not tell the psychiatrist or the doctor, which is one of the worst things you can do. Uh, Let me just say that again. You're not a doctor. So you taking your child off of the medication that's been prescribed without
Hmm.
having, any type of consultation, not only does it affect the child, but it can take 2 weeks sometimes for the medication to get into your system. And so you just allow that whole cycle to start all over again. And you're wondering why
Hmm.
they're not acting right or not doing the right
Hmm.
thing or saying the right thing. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
so that
And
one,
some
if
medicines
you're
can be dangerous to stop abruptly, because
right,
you sometimes people can withdraw from the, and not, and it doesn't mean that it has to be a habit forming medication for it to be something you
right,
can withdraw from, but it can have
right.
other things in your levels of things in your body drop to dangerous points where you usually they'd be tapered off. So just to put that out there for our listeners.
Absolutely. And I just feel like if you're not a doctor, don't operate in such.
Hmm.
But do what's best for you, like literally what's best for you. Don't allow the stigma and the fear. And, you've heard Janae talk about it. I've shared, that I've dealt with depression. And I mean, I never attempted suicide, but it was really, really low points in my life. And I was this, now I'm not preaching now, but I was a minister and a singer and, gospel singer at that. And just always on people's stages doing something, and I would leave the stage so depressed. So I could have, we could have been praising God and everybody's happy, and I'm leaving hurt and just withdrawn and lonely and just unfulfilled. Didn't matter how many people I made smile, didn't matter how many people I made cry, joyfully. Didn't matter if the song or the sermon meant something to them. I wasn't happy. I wasn't joyful. I was not okay. And so it took some time to press through all of that. And then, like I said earlier, Satan's job is to still kill and destroy. So he'll use things that we struggle with to try to, make us feel certain ways again. And so I can't say that once I was done with depression, that was it. And because, like I just said, when my mom died, PTSD came back, and part of PTSD is depression. The insomnia is a part of the PTSD. And so I was a counselor going to counseling so that I could get help. There's nothing wrong with that. But as you
Hmm.
know, in the African American community, especially, we shine away from that. We frown away from that. And I actually, I'll be having my minister actually come on in a few weeks, and to talk about the things that he's learned, because he allowed me to do Celebrate Life at the church when even before I was a member. And Celebrate Life is just a program that I would do, teaching people about the symptoms of depression in order to prevent suicide. Suicide prevention is really important to me because, like you said, there's signs, there's symptoms there. A lot of times you can even find them just by Googling them, but we won't do that. We'll
Right.
look up cancer, or we'll look up, I don't know, a surgery. We'll look up all the physical illnesses, but we won't
Hmm.
look up the mental ones or maybe
Yeah.
emotional ones. And so I'm like, you can help save a life just by your knowledge and by
Yeah.
sharing. I think that us sharing our testimonies, there's healing in that. You know what I'm saying? It says we overcome, by the word of our testimony, the blood and lamb and the word of our testimony. And so a lot of people have tried to keep me in a box. And for a long time, I was quiet about the things that I went through. It's not necessarily easy to share, especially with the audience. The once this is out there, it's out there. But if I can literally help one person to know that you can still be encouraged and you can still go on, and that even if you've had any type of mental health diagnosis or undiagnosed mental health issues, that you can still be successful, you can still thrive, and you can still recover. You know what I mean? Then for me, that's worth it. And for family and friends who don't want to be associated with me because of it, then that's okay too. It's a process. It's a grieving process. You know what I mean, for that as well. But um really, as long as I have Jesus, I know that I'll be okay. He'll send somebody else. It'll be a ram in the bush. You know what I mean? He'll send someone there, like your friend was there to help you through what you were experiencing with COVID. He'll send friends. He'll send other family members that you didn't even know. I'm closer to my dad's side of the family than I've ever been. And I didn't know them when he was living. You know what I mean? And so
Hmm.
we have a family Zoom call started by my cousin Ryan every Friday. I never thought I would be sitting
Uh-huh.
in the living room on a Friday night, but because of the pandemic, it had us slow down and be able to, commune with our
Yeah.
family. And so just in this time, we're getting ready to close, but I would just like for you to just mention any final remarks that you have, but also what would you like to leave the people who are watching, and even the people who are watching after this broadcast? What would you like for them to just kind of take away from all of the things that we talked about today, or something that you haven't mentioned yet?
Sure. Few things. Um, don't underestimate how compounded trauma affects how you experience what's happening in the moment. It's not always how you're experiencing what's happening in the moment. There's societal trauma, there's generational trauma that we get from our families, there's the experiences that we went through up until this point that all inform how we look at and respond to what's in front of us right now. So don't discount how that affects your experience. Number two, um, it's okay to find treatment providers for your mental health, your physical health, that you think are going to best be able to respond to your needs. I make a point to look for female black providers as much as I humanly can, because every time that I haven't, I've always come away feeling unheard. Well, often, not always, but more often than I ever care to again, feeling like my needs are dismissed or that my pain has been minimized. A lot of doctors are literally taught that black people do not experience physical pain like other people do, like white people do, which is why experiments were caused on us to be able to like kind of like without any anesthesia for long times during slavery, and that those ideas stick. So I'm not saying that's the case for everybody, but it's something that's still taught in medical school that we don't experience pain the way that other people do. So to advocate for yourself by finding providers that will listen and to be able to speak to what you need when you don't have that accessible is important. You are worth advocating for yourself. Your black mental health matters. Your black life matters for the rest of you, just like it matters for you to be able to stay physically alive. So let's love ourselves enough to be able to treat ourselves like we matter and to treat one another in this time like we're not alone and that we're looking out for one another.
Amen. Good stuff. Well, Janae, thank you so much for taking the time to just talk to me and everyone
Yeah.
watching, those watching
Thank
now
you
and
for
later. Can
having
you
me.
just give your social media pages so people want to get contact with you?
The main one is Instagram and it's Janai Marshall Art. That with the Instagram handle. That's the best place to find me during my time.
Okay. And again, I'm Lisa, One Singing Lady Gilliam. You can find me on YouTube. If you're watching this version, if you're watching on the other social media platforms, it's One Singing Lady spelled out ONESINGINGLADY. And on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, it's the number one. So One Singing Lady, numeral one, One Singing Lady. And so I hope that you will like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube page. I'll be doing live videos the rest of this month, just about mental health and just speaking to different people about their own experiences. You're guaranteed to learn something, from each one. Each person has a different perspective, a powerful perspective, for their experiences. Thank you for those who watch live. Thank you for those who are going to watch after the broadcast, and thank you for those who have shared. I saw on social media some of you all shared. Thanks, Lauren. I definitely saw yours. Um, I hope that you learned something. If you have any questions, you can leave them in this chat on YouTube or anywhere that you saw the video. And if they are directed to Janae and you haven't connected with her, I will make sure that she actually gets to see them or that she has them as well. So thanks. One Singing Lady and Janae out. And we will see
Thank
you
you
next
so much for having me.
Wednesday at 5. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. You have a blessed day. Have a good
Bye.
one. Thanks, Janae. Bye bye.
Bye.